This is the Dales Report, and happy to be joined on the podcast here today once again, Rob Tessarolo, CEO of NeonMind. Rob, how's things?
Things are good. Shade, how are you doing today?
Good, as usual. How was the summer? It's wrapping it up. We're now into Q4, but hopefully we start seeing a little bit of movement because I'm sure, as you can probably relate, we've had some investor fatigue, definitely in the industry over the last few months.
Yeah, the summer is obviously a slow time. I mean, I think that we were focused on continuing to advance our plan and executing against the plan that we have. And, we're excited about what the rest of this year has in store for our company. And frankly, we're, continue to be bullish on the sector.
Yeah, well, you talked about being bullish and excited. You made it some big news, obviously, last week. You announced the divestiture, of its functional food assets, as well as share ownership in translational life sciences to focus on NE0001, which is a synthetic psilocybin compound to treat obesity, which we've talked about in the past. So have you now officially, I guess, with this announcement, dedicated yourself to a full drug development and clinical focus? And if so, why?
Yeah, so that's, the short answer to that is yes. I mean, that is our new focus. And I think it was important for us. We spent, the better part of the first 6 months of this year really trying to define what that pathway would look like to take our identified programs through to an NDA with the FDA.
Yep.
And in so doing that, we recognize how valuable and how far ahead we are in terms of the focusing on a very unique indication with psilocybin. Mm-hmm. And it was for us a matter of looking at what our non-core assets were and trying to ensure we have a simple and executable business without a lot of distractions and create a business that was aligned to the amount of bandwidth we have. And that for us means a high value shot on net in terms of our drug development program with NEO001 for chronic weight management and obesity, and also focusing on standing up NeonMind branded specialty clinics for the delivery of mental health treatments here in Canada.
So what is, I guess, the idea? I know last time we had we spoke a little bit about the footprint, about the clinics and the rollout with that. What is the overall strategy, I guess, as far as timeline and what you're seeing yourself as far as clinical rollout in the next 12 to 24 months?
So our strategy with respect to the specialty clinics business that we've announced and that we are actively pursuing is to become a trusted partner in interventional psychiatric care. There are a number of currently approved interventional psychiatric treatments that have really groundbreaking and can really revolutionize some of the patient care. Things like IV ketamine, intranasal S-ketamine, transcranial magnetic stimulation or neurostimulation as it's commonly referred to. All of these treatment modalities are currently approved, and we think that they can be more efficiently and effectively deployed in Canada. The availability of a lot of these modalities is limited to the very, very high density population urban areas. And so we're looking to evaluate across the country the right footprint that makes sense to ensure we can meet local market needs and stand up clinics to be delivering interventional psychiatric care. The intention longer term is to be that trusted partner. And then when psychedelic modalities are approved, psychedelic products are approved by Health Canada, we'll be in a position to have the specialized settings ready to deliver that care to patients with various conditions that psychedelic substances may in fact be indicated for it at a later date.
Do you believe that's only a matter of time with Health Canada?
Yeah, I mean, we think that the psychedelic substances have a tremendous potential to heal. We think that the early data that's being seen in some of the academic settings by some of the other companies in the sector who have released some of their early data, we think that the effect is somewhat striking. We know that it's the durability of the effect is very, very interesting. You have this unique combination of a striking effect that's durable relative to efficacy and acute dosing. Mm-hmm. And that's not something you see generally in pharmaceutical products. Generally to get long-term effect, you need to dose chronically. And what we're seeing with psychedelic modalities is short-term or acute dosing, 1 or 2 doses separated by a couple of weeks, and we're seeing a durability of that effect. So we think it's just a matter of time till the right R&D program is put together and advanced For us, our focus is outside of the psychiatric indications.
Yep.
So we're not going down the major depressive disorder, suicidal ideation, PTSD indications. We're looking and focused on, and frankly, we're the only company in the world that's focused on psilocybin for chronic weight management in the obese population.
Right. Well, I know we've talked about this in the past. I actually was reading earlier this week. There's a new study that was released by the CDC this week, disclosed that children and teenagers saw their body mass index increase at almost double the rate during the pandemic to date. Alarming number, to say the least. So this is a major and alarming fact that perhaps isn't getting the attention it deserves. So where are we today? Like, do you believe this trend will continue as the pandemic turns endemic and interruption in daily life becomes, quite honestly, the new norm?
Yeah, I mean, sure. I think the pandemic has exacerbated, the growth of, I think, many medical conditions. I think we know that to be a fact with many of the mental health disorders. We know that we see that data has grown those indications. Obesity was growing at an alarming rate before the pandemic. I mean, I think when you look at the incidence of obesity around the globe, and specifically in the U.S., you see over the last 25 years that incidences went from, the prevalence went from somewhere in the low teens, high single digits to 25, 30% in some areas of the country. So yeah, I think this is the condition. This is a complex condition. It's not an eating disorder per se. It's a complex medical condition that has many facets to it, and it's not going away anytime soon. And new modalities, innovative treatments are absolutely going to be required to continue to help those patients that struggle with this condition.
Yeah, well, alarming stat to say the least. Why do you think that it doesn't get enough attention? Like, when I look at the psychedelic industry, a lot of the attention is the PTSD, the depression. This was a huge concern in North America even prior to like this whole pandemic occurring. But do you believe that? Do you agree with me when I'm saying it with regards to the psychedelic industry, how the PTSD and depression gets a lot more of the attention than, say, like, I look at yourself, I look at a couple other companies that are now getting into the gambling aspect. It's all mental health to a certain way as we learn more about this industry, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the early companies that were into this space, obviously we're building on the academic research that was out there in the psychiatric indications and the mental health conditions. And I think newcomers to the space are companies that had great research ideas and were looking for innovative approaches in this sector. We're looking outside of what the traditional evidence or some of the early evidence was showing. And for us, we've always maintained that we're very proud of our research hypothesis, this concept that we can take a CNS approach to a metabolic condition or a metabolic problem. We think is going to be has the potential to be a very differentiated target product profile if we can demonstrate safety and efficacy with this asset. That's where we're at right now. Is we're planning to visit with the FDA later this year. We've made a request for a Type B meeting, and we expect to meet with them to share our research plan and get their consultation for what our plans are in terms of taking psilocybin NEO-001, our psilocybin program, into obese patients. And we expect to be enrolling first patient in the early part of 2022. And then we're off and running and creating data and creating information, data and evidence, if you will, in this patient population, much like some of the other companies that I think we all talk about in the psychedelic space we're doing with the psychiatric indications, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
That's where we're at on the obesity indication.
So a lot of companies, PTSD, depression, focusing on that. As you said, trials hopefully beginning early 2022. You start trials. If you're new to the space, you're trying to understand, what companies are focused on what within the industry. You start collecting data. What opportunity does that present from an investment standpoint, knowing that you're focusing primarily on this and very few are? What does that translate into a year, 2 years down the road?
Right. So there's sort of two. I think there's two components to that question. One, being an early mover and chasing the obesity indication, and we are looking at developing our studies in accordance with the FDA guidance for an anti-obesity medication. And so having that, being a front runner in that regard, and frankly, the only company in the world at the moment who's planning research in this area, if everything pans out and plays out according to plan, we would be the only company, the first company with an indication for obesity. And that will allow us to be out promoting, educating, and deploying psilocybin in this indication. And nobody else will, who doesn't actually go out and replicate the data and do the studies themselves and come up with the same evidence and move through the same pathway at the FDA. So we think from a long-term perspective, being an early mover, is obviously going to give us is ultimately going to give us an advantage.
Yeah. Well,
and the second element to that, the second component to the second part of the answer to that is that, really within 2 years, we have a belief that we can read out a phase 1 and phase 2 study. Phase 1 being a dose confirmation study in obese patients, because psilocybin has never been evaluated in obese patients before, as well as a proof of concept study, a phase 2 study that demonstrates efficacy for chronic weight loss in obese patients. And if we can do that, we're well armed to get to an end of phase 2 meeting with the FDA, which is a critical time point in any biotech company's future, and understand what the agency will require us to do with respect to confirmatory registrational studies.
When you're actually, let's say everything comes to fruition, you get a drug, goes to market, this helps people with obesity. You're walking into a clinic, you're taking psilocybin. I know there's different compounds and what the duration is. Is it tough to really say what we can do now and we can predict now versus so much we're going to learn along the way? Let's say in 2 or 3 years, what we think is the model that we have in place today could be the complete opposite, say in 2 or 3 years from now, because some compounds like DMT, for example, are a lot more intense. You can have a psychedelic experience, let's say in 15 to 20 minutes. It almost sounds, I don't know what to think of that, but at the same time too, psilocybin's a lot more of a duration, balanced out throughout the day. So fast forward 5 years from now, what does this all look like as far as like clinics, approval? We have insurance coverage? Are we going like once, twice a year for a daily or annual checkup just to see how we're doing? All those things that come to fruition, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, as you just quickly and easily pointed out, there are myriad dynamics with respect to commercializing and deploying any innovative new substance that's going to be given to humans for a specific indication. So a few things that I would say. Number one, first and foremost, we have to follow the evidence. So depending on what trials you design and what differentiation you can demonstrate with this placebo or traditional treatment modalities, that will drive how you ultimately deploy these medicines. At the moment, our view is that based on a lot of the classical work that was done for some of the traditional indications with psilocybin, what you're looking at is a fairly long hallucinogenic experience with some wraparound psychotherapy or lifestyle modification therapy to support that patient to then go off and, quote unquote, change their life, improve their well-being. For us in the obesity category, we expect to support them support the patients to have significant weight loss fairly quickly over the first 6 months. But importantly, in the obesity indication, for obese patients who are able to lose weight, there is a high percentage of patients who have weight regain in the sort of 40 to 44 week period. And so for us, it's going to be important to evaluate whether or not a singular what the duration of durability of effect is for psilocybin, and whether a booster is required for those patients. Gotcha. We know very, very well that weight regain and frankly the treatment failures in these patients come from a place where patients are unable to sort of get used to or have a renewed sense of who they are as a smaller person, as someone who's lost weight. And so we can help the patients to lose weight and then help them through that renewed awareness of who they are or who they have become. We think that we can have a real differentiated target product profile with respect to what other pharmacotherapies are out there. And importantly, with acute dosing, right? 1 or 2 doses followed by psychotherapy and maybe a booster, at the right time throughout the course of their weight management term.
I'd be curious to see some of the conversations that you have with government officials like FDA, Health Canada, the future, because let's look at it like, we are going down a road where, can you imagine the amount of heart conditions that are going to take place for this next generation taking place? That's obviously a big concern. Is that a concern with some of the conversations that you find being a CEO of a company? Like, that are those some of the conversations that you experience on a day-to-day basis?
So with respect to health economic and outcomes research and demonstrating the value to drive access for your medicine, you absolutely have to look at all of those things. The
Right.
events that are spared, the lives that are saved, even the improvements in quality of life. All of those things go into these models, and so it's important that companies who are pursuing innovative therapies or innovative modalities like psychedelics have a good understanding and a robust experience base to understand what you need to, the trials you need to design, the endpoints you need to collect to be able to make those arguments in those cases when you are in front of governments and payers, PBMs and large payers, in North America. It's an evidence-based decision-making process relative to value and access. And you need to be you need to define that plan very, very well, and you need to execute your strategy accordingly.
We're in the world of data, aren't we? That'll answer all those questions.
No question.
Just a reminder, NeonMind trades on the CSE under the ticker symbol NEON. I was going to ask you that question.
Sorry, I thought you were wrapping up.
Let's take two when we do that here in Hollywood. But anyway, CSC under the ticker symbol NEON. Great angle. Great to see you back, obviously, and anxious to see how this Q4 will perform. But keep up the great work. I know you're busy, but appreciate the update regarding the company.
Thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Rob.